Up next, we ran into Jeff when he signed up to come to our Minneapolis event this spring. Our next guest, Jeff Plaman, works for the Minnesota Department of Education, and that's what really got Leilani and I excited, because we have a state-level DOE that is looking at digital curriculum and its infusion into school and the impact it's having on the role between the student and the teacher. So you're in for a real treat, because Jeff is leading some really great work. So let's welcome Jeff Plaman up to the stage. Give him a warm welcome. So Jeff, thank you.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I want to thank the Learning Council for inviting me to come here. I joined the Department of Education in Minnesota just a little bit over a year ago, year and a few months ago, after a long career of teaching both in public schools in Minnesota and in private international education in Berlin, Beijing, and Singapore. And when I came back, I had to get a little bit reacquainted with, the lay of the land here, as it were, because I'm an educational leader in my state. Kind of need to find out what's going on. And so I joined this Learning Council event, hadn't heard of the Learning Council before, and it's been absolutely fabulous. I think the thing that I love most about this event today is that we're having the conversation everywhere from what I would call futurism, with Leilani's talk about, where the consumer trends are going with us, all the way down to the level of what Ben talked about in showing what can actually happen when you're able to build something from the ground up. And so my job here today is to talk to you a little bit about this concept of high tech and high touch. So I find myself, as I'm getting a little bit older, kind of walking this unique line, because I've always been a real tech evangelist in my life. And I find myself more and more now, as I'm getting older, thinking about, well, what's really the purpose of all of this, right? Like, what is the end that we're kind of working for? So that's what this talk is about today. So let me tell you a little bit about my state. If you don't know where we are, Canada's up there. And a little bit of information about us. We have around 500 school districts and charter schools in our state. We have 2,000 schools within those organizations and serve 856,000 odd students. We are a proudly local state, which means we don't do a lot in terms of dictating which technology is used and how that all works. We had the first charter schools in the nation. And recently, we've been proudly working on an effort to advance pre-K for every student in our state. It was funded by the state legislature in 2016, so that any school district who wants to can apply to have a pre-K center that's funded. And of course, like many of you, we're working on career and college readiness goals. And so all of that is a little bit of context about our state. And these are some of the headlines, though, that we kind of deal with. And maybe some of you are dealing with similar things. We have a real teacher shortage in our state, and I heard that come up several times from everyone else, especially among teachers that are representative of all the student groups that we serve. It's especially bad in some of those cases. We've got great ACT scores for some groups. For other groups, we haven't been able to really honestly close the achievement gap. And for college and career pathways, we're finding increasing labor shortages, like many of you are, I'm sure. And so, this is also occurring in the background of these other headlines. We're trying to use technology a lot to alleviate some of these things. Now, you've been sitting for a long time. You've been sitting at tables. You may have said hi to the people next to you, but you haven't really had a chance to formally do that. So I'd like you to just say hello to the person next to you and have a quick elbow partner conversation. How about some of these challenges that I brought up? What would you say is your greatest challenge that you're facing right now? And how do you think digital learning might help? I'll just give you a quick 2 minutes for this. So now you've met the people next to you. This is intentional because you're going to be doing some interaction during this presentation. So I'm going to talk about some ideas here, and there will be an opportunity for you to actually work through this, because what I want you to walk out of here with today is a plan to take at least one action on how you're going to consider humanizing digital learning. So in my role, I lead and provide technical assistance for digital learning to schools. We don't have a state online school, so a lot of my time is used working with the LEAs. So these are independent school districts, charter schools, and cooperatives that run the online schools in our state. But I also provide leadership and technical assistance for all digital learning. And so when I have opportunities to talk with people about this, and in fact, I recently revised our application to become a state-approved online learning provider, the very first question is, why do you want to become a state-approved online learning provider? And that's an important question for us to sit down and ask ourselves all the time. What is your why? You may have seen this. How many people have seen this image? It's kind of making its way around tech conferences. This is one of my favorites. And I saw this in a presentation that Bill Rankin gave one time in Nice. But this is by a French artist named Vilma. And it was done in the late 1890s, just ahead of the Paris World's Fair. And it was a part of a series where they asked artists to sort of think about what the future might look like. So as you look at this and think about what is your vision, what do you think Vilma's vision was of what digital learning would look like? What do you notice about that image? What does it tell you about the vision of that place? Yep, absolutely. Who's shredding the books? The teacher. Okay. And it looks to me to be a very standard process, right? There's not a lot of choice. The teacher decides which books get put in when, which pace they go out to the students. The students are just supposed to sit there and absorb it all, right? Is the teacher getting any information back? Well, maybe. I mean, you can kind of look like this kid over here. Is he staring out the window? Maybe. And I wonder about this person right here. Is that actually, a position of responsibility, or was he naughty? I can't tell. But this thing to me is like most interesting, because what it really does is it reduces education, or the vision of education, to inputs and outputs. And I think a lot of times that's kind of how we view it, especially when we talk about educational analytics. It's a system of inputs that we provide and outputs that we get back. It assumes uniformity and it demands conformity. The teacher is clearly the source of the knowledge. But all of us who currently work in schools or spend a lot of time in schools know that this is far from the truth. Actually, education isn't like that at all. And one of the challenges for us in deciding what to use, what purchases to make, what instructional choices to make, is that there's not a lot of guidance. There's not a lot of guidance from research, in fact. If you look at the new learning that we're talking about, there's very little out there in terms of high quality research, gold standard research. And there's a really good reason for that. It's this. Learning is really, really complicated. So what I'd like you to do with this in mind, have another quick conversation with the person next to you about the promise and limitations of the machines that we're using for learning and that we use to assist students in their learning. Just take a couple minutes. What's your reaction? I heard a lot of discussion about, I heard learning styles mentioned as I walked around. I heard students able to sort of go through and do tasks that were asked of them, but they don't really own it. They may not show mastery. I want to kind of bring this back to thinking about this question of what the machines that we built to support us can do and what they can't do. So the first slide here, just shows a few thoughts that I have. This is probably not an exhaustive list, but machines make unbiased objective choices because they're programmed to do so, right? They can do quick calculations at scale. That's how we get and use the analytics. We are not able to get that kind of analytics using spreadsheets ourselves. They apply algorithms consistently. And algorithms, by their nature, change, but the application of the algorithm is always consistent with the algorithm itself. And they allow us to sort of access information anytime, anywhere. These are some of the important things that I kind of thought of when we think about machines for learning. But there's another side to this as well, okay? This is borrowed from Rick Robinson, but our machines can't choose objectives or hold values. They can only hold those values and meet those objectives that are programmed or fed into them. Now, programmers, they have values, and that can be baked into their programming. Absolutely. Actions of machines are really only based on what they've experienced in the past. If they're given a unique scenario, the only way they can really deal with it is to kind of work it into the existing scheme of what they have. Okay? They can't discern causation from correlation. And this is a really important thing in education sometimes, right? So a teacher sees something, they make an assumption that this thing that they saw was caused by this thing, when in fact they may not be related at all. And in the era of big data, we see misjudgments made all the time about data, that we have information about a student and their learning, but it doesn't tell us the cause. This last one I think is particularly interesting. Machines can't imagine and invent a new future. And nobody knows this better than the Russian grand chess master Garry Kasparov. Any of you play chess? And willing to admit it? Okay. I've got a segment of video I want to show you about Kasparov and his recollections of his famous matches against Deep Blue.
When I first met Deep Blue in 1996, in February, I had been the world champion for more than 10 years. And I had played 182 world championship games and hundreds of games against other top players in other competitions. I knew what to expect from my opponents and what to expect from myself. I was used to measure their moves and to gauge their emotional state by watching their body language and looking at their eyes. And then I sat across the chessboard from Deep Blue. I immediately sensed something new, something unsettling. You might experience a similar feeling the first time you ride in the driver's car, or the first time your new competitor manager issues an order at work. But when I sat at that first game, I couldn't be sure what is this thing was capable of. Technology can advance in leaps, and IBM had invested heavily. I lost that game. And I couldn't help wondering, might it be invincible? Was my beloved game of chess over? These were human doubts, human fears, and the only thing I knew for sure, that my opponent, Deep Blue, had no such worries at all. I fought back after this devastating blow to win the first match. But the writing was on the wall. I eventually lost to the machine, but I didn't suffer the fate of John Henry, who won, but died with his hammer in his hand. It turned that the world of chess still wanted to have a human chess champion. And even today, when a free chess app on the latest mobile phone is stronger than Deep Blue, people are still playing chess. Even more than ever before. Doomsayers predicted that nobody would touch the game that could be conquered by the machine. And they were wrong, proven wrong. But doomsaying has always been a popular pastime when it comes to technology. I learned from my own experience is that we must face our fears if we want to get the most out of our technology. And we must conquer those fears if we want to get the best out of our humanity. While licking my wounds, I got a lot of inspiration from my battles against Deep Blue. As the old Russian saying goes, you can't beat them, join them. And I thought, what if I could play with a computer, together with a computer at my side, combining our strengths? Human intuition plus machine's calculation. Human strategy, machine tactic. Human experience, machine's memory. Could it be the perfect game ever played? My idea came to life in 1998 under the name of Advanced Chess when I played this human plus machine competition against another elite player. But in this first experiment, we both failed to combine human and machine skills effectively. Advanced Chess found its home on the internet. And in 2005, a so-called freestyle chess tournament produced a revelation. Team of grandmasters and top machines participated, but the winners were not grandmasters, not a supercomputer. The winners were a pair of amateur American chess players operating 3 ordinary PCs at the same time. Their skill of coaching their machines effectively counteracted the superior chess knowledge of their grandmaster opponents and much greater computational power of others. 20 years after my match with Deep Blue, second match, this sensational, the brain's last stand headline has become commonplace as intelligent machines move in every sector, seemingly every day. But unlike in the past, when machines replaced farm animals, manual labor, now they're coming after people with college degree and political influence. And as someone who fought machines a lot, I'm here to tell you this is excellent, excellent news. Eventually, every profession will have to feel this pressure, or else it will mean humanity has ceased to make progress. We don't get to choose when and where technological progress stops. We cannot slow down. In fact, we have to speed up. Our technology excels at removing difficulties and uncertainties from our lives. And so we must seek out ever more difficult, ever more uncertain challenges. Machines have calculations. We have understanding. Machines have instructions. We have purpose. Machines have objectivity. We have passion. We should not worry about what our machines can do today. Instead, we should worry about what they still cannot do today, because we will need the help of the new intelligent machines to turn our grandest dreams into reality. And if we fail, it's not because our machines are too intelligent or not intelligent enough. If we fail, it's because we grew complacent and limited our ambitions. Our humanity is not defined by any skill, like swinging a hammer or even playing chess. There is one thing only human can do. That's dream. So let us dream big. Thank you.
Wow, clap for Gary. That was amazing. So I think the lessons that he speaks to, I mean, they definitely resonated with me, and I think they should resonate with all of us who are in education, because right now what I feel like is we're kind of facing this same question. Some of the development that we're seeing and the way we've deployed it is effectively taking teachers out of the equation. And that concerns me. So I guess the question that I want to ask is, how do we make the most of our digital tools, these fantastic digital tools, while leveraging those things that make us uniquely human? So thank you. I'm going to walk off now. Just kidding. We're actually going to talk about some ways to do that, because it would be unfair of me to just leave it there. So we're going to talk about 3 action steps. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. We have time, I think, to discuss each of these as we go. So I'm going to talk about my take on these, and then I'd like you to discuss this one concept at your table. So the first of 3 action steps that I'm advocating. First of all, I added this one in after my meeting yesterday, because I came here yesterday and I sat in on the user experience group, and it was a fantastic conversation. And when I think about user experience, I think about the experience of the child in your school, the experience of the teacher in your school, the experience of the parent, the experience of the principal. That is user experience. It's not just interacting with the digital tools, it's all of it. So just so you understand where I'm coming from with this. So number 1, we've got to focus on learning. We've got to make sure that our focus is there. If our focus is not there, we're doing it wrong, okay? So in doing so, pay attention to that user experience. Know what it feels like for every single human to be part of that experience, including making sure that human resources are addressed in any technology plan that you make. This is one common thing that I come up against all the time when I'm having conversations with people. We don't review technology plans, and I love it that we don't. They're up to the districts and the cooperatives to develop themselves. But when I have these conversations with people, I ask the question, so who is going to support that resource once X vendor has trained your staff and is now gone? How are you going to talk about meaningful pedagogy around that? So making sure that that ongoing human resource is included. I'm a little bit biased. I used to be an instructional coach. I think we need instructional coaches in the schools. Make sure that there is a core shared belief that achievement results from actions that teachers take. So understanding that The teacher can only really control what they can control, but that their actions actually do have an impact. And maybe connecting analytics to that will help us achieve that a little bit better. And then the second caveat to that is make sure that the evaluating the effect of teaching on learning is the #1 priority. So, I'm going to give you a chance. Let's just have a little conversation about that at your table. And I've thrown out 2 questions around this focus on learning. How are you doing in your organization? Are you truly learning focused? And maybe sharing what works. Go ahead and have a quick table talk about that, please. So I'm hearing some things that are resonating with people around this, in particular around human resource, people to actually lead this change. I really liked what Ben said again about time is the greatest gift that you can give teachers. Absolutely. When I started teaching way back in 1994, I was fortunate enough to be part of a techie teachers group. And the only thing that we got for it was a t-shirt. We didn't even get time. I did it for a t-shirt. And you'll find in your buildings, people who are passionate about making this kind of change will do it. You just need to give them the opportunity. You need to name the group. You need to bring them together. And if you can afford it, give them time, absolutely. So that's the first one. Make sure we're learning focused. As long as we're focusing on teachers, which we are, because I believe, they're the human interface between the students, we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to include teachers. I've heard people talk about this already, so maybe we can skip over the sharing here, but there's a couple things I want to mention in particular. Second thing, creating intersection points. One of the first complaints that I heard as a newly minted member of the Minnesota Department of Education was when a principal called up and wanted to talk about digital learning a little bit, and he was like, "We're abandoning the math program that we're currently using." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he's like, "The teachers feel like they're not needed. There's no intersection point." Those were his words. There's no intersection point for them to actually interface with the students. It's too good. And what he meant by that, I think, was that it was doing everything that his teachers were doing, and there wasn't room for them to kind of get in there and actually have the conversations. So making sure that there are intersection points that are identified is really important. Another teacher that I work with is talking actively and using open pedagogy in his classroom. So you've heard of open educational resources, right? Open pedagogy is kind of the build-as-you-go model. So what this teacher does is he sets up a learning management system that the students can interact with and actually add content to. So it might have the goals or objectives for a particular unit, but then pretty much it's blank. And the students build it out as they go together. They find the OERs along with the teacher, and they add it in, and they build it together. I used to teach this way myself. I used Wikispaces way back in the day. Anybody still have a Wikispaces account? I don't even know if it's on anymore. But every single time I would teach my biology class, we would start with a blank canvas. And we would build it together as we went. And that was valuable. And then, of course, the use of learning analytics, I don't think I need to mention, because after all, that's what this conference is about, and we're going to be doing lots of deep dive into that later. So let me move fast forward into the third action point. And this one is about prioritizing relationships. I really appreciate that people have been mentioning Hattie's research already. When I go around and talk to people about this, it gets kind of a lukewarm reception, so I never really know if people understand what he did. But Hattie did meta-analyses involving around, over 240 million students and numerous studies. and determine this thing called effect size. So these are actions that are taken in school and how they correlate with actually moving the needle. Okay? So an effect size of 1, if you don't really understand it, an effect size of 1 is equivalent to 1 year's advancement in grade level, or sort of 2 letter grades, so moving from a C to an A. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because strong student-teacher relationships has an effect size of 0.72. That's very high. It's much higher than direct instruction, which is also high, so there is a place for direct instruction, according to research. It's higher than cooperative learning, which is right above the average, which is 0.4 for all of the studies. What's less good is homework. Individualized instruction helps. But having a strong student-teacher relationship helps even more. So, how can we do that? So, I borrowed this chart from the Australian Society for Evidence-Based Teaching because I think it really does a great job of representing what high-quality relationships are in teaching. So high-performance relationships have 2 components. One is that they are high care. So the teacher makes time for their students. The teacher genuinely cares about the students, shows warmth to them, like a parent would to their own child, has time to be there with them, shows them encouragement, sets up a classroom that's safe for all who are there. That's care. We can't automate care. The other thing is a combination of not just care, because that's friendly, right? And we want more than that. So including in there a press for consistently high expectations is something that we need to do. So I just want to give you a moment. I'm near the end, but I want to let you talk about that. If you were to move to this in your organization, what would it look like, feel like, sound like? What might you do differently in your organization? Is there anything there that could get in the way right now? Have a conversation about that. It's nearly lunchtime. Thank you very much. I'm hungry. How about you? Who's hungry? I'm getting there too. I really appreciate this, and I got to apologize for making a little transition here, but hopefully you've engaged with someone now in conversation that maybe you want to continue that into lunch. Maybe you just want to completely stop thinking because your brain is full. Whatever, I get there too. But I think it's this prioritizing relationships that is something, that's like a secret sauce that we need to remember as we think about implementing digital curriculum, blended learning environments. I'm sure a lot of the PD that you guys have done around that really helps the teacher see themselves. Like, how am I going to be now that I'm no longer the person delivering the content? How am I going to plan for every individual in my room, under my care, and not just planning to get through material by a certain date? Teachers need our help, all of our help, to visualize themselves in those new roles. And if we can't help them do that, guess what's happening to the teacher shortage? It's going to get worse, people, right? We've got to get back to the place where this profession is valued. The human art of teaching is as valuable as the science of teaching. So here are the things that I talk about a lot, just to leave you with these things. If you're a teacher working with kids, 4 things you can remember. Number 1, be there for them. Be present in their lives. If you're an online teacher, being present means that you're checking in with them through lots of different modes of communication. I know a lot of teachers who teach from cell phones right now. That's their primary communication tool with students. They're texting students, doing FaceTime calls, all kinds of things, all through their cell phones. Some people resist doing that. I'm not making any judgment about either of those, but you've got to be there for your kids. Be kind, be yourself, and believe in what they can do. Thank you.